brain shows the effect of good use. The altitudes and velocities that I've navigated my brain through you. On the psychopharmaceutical side here, it's an old joke, but I'm not tell it again. There are three very serious side effects of psychotropic botanical products. The first is long-term memory gain. 1 second, you can take it from the amoeba to Dan Quayle. If that's the solution. The second side effect of psychotropic vegetables is short-term memory loss, and I forget the third. I'm giving tribute to, I think I got to give tribute to John Lennon. And it's not just those of us that we have been honored to know, but my brothers and sisters, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that we in this room belong to a long and honorable chain of visionary explorers and brain navigators and mystics who have gone as far within as they could. Just in this country, you know, this is the third psychedelic revolution that our country's been through. I must pay tribute to the people that we got to know by history at Harvard. The second psychedelic revolution took place, or started at Cambridge around the turn of the century. William James founded the first psychological laboratory in this country. He wrote that incredible book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. That was nitrous oxide, hashish, and opium. Oliver Wendell Holmes, you know. I think we must pay tribute to, as we always do, to the writers like Ginsberg and William Burroughs. But in the second revolution, Mark Twain was probably the most outspoken advocate of brain navigation. Indeed, he talked Ulysses S. Grant into getting a little neurological assistance. Grant, you know, was writing his autobiography. He needed money, and he had a terrible writer's block. So Mark Twain got a doctor to prescribe cocaine for him, and thus the world got Ulysses S. Grant autobiography. I know this is not a place where you're supposed to mention things like cocaine, so I won't. I'm not a great fan of cocaine. As William Burroughs said to me about a month ago, that I don't like any drug that makes me twitch. We had the first psychedelic revolution in this country, and again, started in Cambridge. The enemy of the second, we've got our war on drugs now. The enemy that William James and his crew faced was a women's Christian temperance union. And of course, the first revolution which took place in Cambridge, the enemy then was people like Cotton Mather and the Salem witchcraft trials, and then later came Ralph Waldo Emerson, who had very close touch. Michael Horowitz can give you the fingerprints and dates and all of this. He was very close touch with the psychedelic poets in England at the time. Margaret Fuller, probably the founder of women's liberation in this country. Hashish and opium. Michael and Cindy delighted me about a month ago when they quoted text line of one of my great heroes, Thoreau, David Henry Thoreau. It's interesting, you know, he went to jail for passive, nonviolent resistance to the government of Washington, D.C. And by the time when Emerson came and said, "What are you doing in there?" and he says, "What are you doing out there, Ralph?" You know why he was in jail? I mean, this is talking about deja vu again. He was in jail for not paying a tax who have gone to support the Mexican war. So there's long series of warfares, holy warfares of the industrial northerners against the vegetable growers of the south. Oh, Thoreau, by the way, it was ether. I'm not advocating. He's a great line about it. If you want to visit the stars, try ether. Could we be here, or would we be here in this moment of exaltation and sense of positive growth if we had not had in the last 6 months probably the 6 most glorious months in human history? We all feel it, and I know when you saw the video shots coming from Tiananmen Square, and you saw 100,000, 300,000, 1 million young Chinese students, and you saw that look in their eye, that Woodstock gleam, and you saw them with the headbands and the B signs, and they had the old Abby Hoffman trick. They learned it for television. They knew how to play the cameras. They were throwing the flowers at the tanks and saying, "Soldiers, we love you." I mean, and then of course the Berlin Wall coming down. The last found out tonight a wonderful Christmas phone call, and we both shared our joy of it in a small way, and in a sense a larger way. Everything we've been doing was part of the evolution of youth, the new breed that brought that wall down, because it was individual freedom. I personally would give giving out Academy Oscars for who brought the wall down. I would name 3 wonderful prophets of our time that influenced me and that I was fortunate enough to meet. The first of all, of course, was Benjamin Spock. Benjamin Spock taught quantum psychology. He said to the parents, "Treat your kids as individuals." I mean, that's the most powerful statement ever made, preparing us for the information age when you have to climb into your brain. There's only one person who can run a brain, and that's the individual. The second person, who is not an American, is a Swiss gentleman, and also a doctor. Dr. Spock and Dr. Hoffman, I mean... one of the great organic chemists of our time. We all know that he was a very deeply cultured man with a deep roots in the tradition of German and Swiss and European mysticism, so that he just didn't happen to ride that funny bicycle home that day and think it was a psychiatric episode. He'd seen the guidebooks. He knew what was going on. Okay. There was a wonderful tribute for Albert. Remember in Hollywood, big St. James Club, and all these people were out there, all dressed up in Sunday night. And I was thinking, I said, Hoffman wrote a book called LSD, My Problem Child. And I said, Albert, they're your children. And third, who's the third person I'm going to mention? Third doctor, Marshall McLuhan. Because number one, Marshall McLuhan was always a strong supporter of the psychedelic movement in this country in the 60s. He actually told me, I get credit, it was his script by him. He told me the words that turn out, to be the American translation of Glasnost and Perestroika. He said, Timothy, tell him, turn on, tune in, and drop out. It's often in the fluent.
Okay. There's a fourth person, too. What? Timothy, there's a fourth person.
Who's that?
Timothy Leary.
Oh, it's no news to you, there's a war on drugs out there. In the history of religious insanity and holy wars, I think this one takes the cake. I mean, the absolute... we do at Harvard after about a year, we're going to have trouble with the taboo against the brain. You're not supposed to tamper with the brain in an industrial society, and we found that out right away. Many times after a while, we'd sit around and we'd say, well, these psychedelic drugs are psychotomimetic. They create serious mental confusion, paranoia, hysterical hallucinations in deans and government officials who have not taken it. One thing that's true, of course, in a war, there's no more self-propaganda. And the one weapon we have, and we're going to talk about what's going to happen. By the way, my script is very positive. Evolution did work for 2 billion years to create the human brain with its wonderful receptor sites. To let people like Czar Bennett and his ilk stop it all. Each of us in our own way have to follow Orwell's basic prescription. In times of Big Brother insanity, your first job is to remain sane yourself. Number 2, look around and you'll find there are a lot of people with twinkling eyes that are sane with you. But each of us has to do this in our own way. When Rick said to me he hoped I would give advice as to how we could get government permission to do research on psychedelic drugs, I'm definitely beyond the government permission situation. Several hundred million East Europeans fought the government because the one. But also, one way I found is common sense. Common sense is so important. I'll give you 3 little common sense things you can do. I was on a radio program talking in Mississippi, Alabama, and somebody talked about marijuana. They say marijuana kills, and I said, marijuana is really not very dangerous. It's the least dangerous thing around. And this old farm guy says, well, I'd like to talk to you, Dr. Leary. He said, you said that marijuana is not dangerous. It seriously injured my son, Billy. Oh, shucks. What happened to Billy? Well, the damn fool went out of the barn and made a mistake, and half a ton of it landed on his arm. About 6 months ago, there was a full-page ad, LA Times, New York Times, Proud. Every Times, every paper in the country, enormous big full-page ad, all white space except a frying pan. And then the frying pan is a frying egg, and it said, "This is your brain on drugs." So there's always a counterculture. There's always the underground. It's happened in the Soviet Union. It's happening here. I got on fax. I got about 5 copies of another advertisement. Same idea, white face. It's a plate now, and on this plate is a fried egg with 2 pieces of bacon and some toast. This is your brain with bacon and buttered toast. Common sense. Because I'm not making fun of the drug crusaders, but I'm not compassionate. We've got to be tremendously empathetic and understand that the people who run the industrial age and run the machinery, they're in despair. It's all over. They know that that old thing is not going to work anymore. They're all out of jobs. I mean, for example, when the wall went down, there's no more evil empire to fight. I was debating G. Gordon Liddy 2 nights ago in Chicago, and I said, Gordon, he's not changed at all. He's still talking about America's a little old lady in the streets, we need big guns around. I said, Gordon, as your friend, I've got to intervene now. I'll take you to the Betty Ford clinic. Break your gun habit. I mean, severe energy deprivation. I do feel sorry for millions of sincere people who, of course, there are many reasons. There are many reasons why there's this war on drugs. One is because they have to have the Cromwellian Calvinist Protestants who run this country have to have someone to war on, and so they got the war on drugs. But deeper than that, there are profound religious issues here. As Terence McKenna has told us so many times, in the old days when it was all one and we were all pagans, vegetables, you'd be eating cocoa leaves, and it was all part of nature, and you couldn't talk about the individual and the individual brain, because there's no individual and no brain. In the industrial age, as you well know, Richard, I look back on it, you cannot allow people in an industrial, mass assembly, factory society to tamper with their brains. You simply can't allow it. This is why you have the robots. We're all here the robot. You're a doctor and I'm a lawyer, and you're a minister and you're a professor, and you're a policeman and you're a criminal. Sorry, but we have you too. We've got our job. You can't have people tampering with their brains like robots suddenly poking around inside. So as we move to the information age, the communication age, the meaning of the information age is, of course, the discovery of the brain. So I would say year 2000, the 21st century would be the century of the brain. And I give credit to the great explorers of Magellan and Columbus and Huxley and well, interesting, Richard. Remember, Aldous Huxley used the metaphors of discovering and going across to the antipodes, and like Australian finding things and coming back. That whole, it's so. Okay, I'll go one more minute here. The thing is that the brain has evolved over 2 billion years, and it's not our fault that the brain, DNA decided that the brain needs certain psychoactive or brain-activating plants and foods. I mean, there's been this wonderful symmetry and synergy between the plant kingdom and the queendom and the animal kingdom, to whatever you want to call it, that the brain needs these substances. I hate to break the news to Tsar Bennett, but you've got the human brain definitely not on your side in this. What's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years? The advanced, underground, psychedelic counterculture of the computer software industry. Many of whom are in this room right now are producing something called artificial reality gear, virtual reality gear. I call it electronic software, WAR. These are suits. You climb into a computer, you know about it, you put your goggles on, but the goggles are screens, and then you produce any kind of, you create reality. Come on. Should we meet for lunch? Should we meet in Taj Mahal? Do you want to meet in the ski slope of San Moritz? What do you got in your San Moritz file? No, how about try this thing? We're going to be living, inhabiting, traveling in artificial reality. The very concept, artificial reality. I mean, isn't that thrilling? A lot of people don't like the word artificial. A lot of people think that, a lot of people tell me drugs are artificial. You need marijuana, it's been around for 20,000 years, you call that artificial? All right, the artificial reality here is going to hook up with the psychedelic brain. Now, don't believe me. Believe the Wall Street Journal. February 2nd, look it up, Ruth. February 2nd, front page, Wall Street Journal, column 1, a big article about Jern Lanier and virtual reality. And the headline said, electronic LSD question mark. There's a picture of Jern Lanier in his dreadlocks. And the sixth paragraph down the first page, it quotes me as saying, this is better than LSD, it's addictive, but it's legal. And the same week, check out the facts, Max, the same week, Forbes magazine, Forbes. Your father would be proud of me, yeah? same stuff. These new simulated artificial reality is going to be more exciting. And it quotes me as saying again that it's better than LSD. These things, there's a genetic and historical thing going on here. There's not an accident that we started all this in the 60s when the baby boom, who would have been television people, you know, that. It's going to happen with or without us. I'll give you one tip, though. If you study the way the Republicans operate, when they start a war, they can't win. What they do is they get elected by saying we're going to fight that war. They get re-elected, as Nixon did, and we all knew after Nixon got re-elected, then they're going to end the war. Now, Bush was elected, you know, after all, he's not a wimp. Look what he did to Noriega. Bush will be re-elected in 1992, and immediately he'll start making peace with us. Because George Shultz said it, the war on drugs is not good for business. The question here is, what would I have done differently? Let me think about it. Thank you very much.
That's what moved into the office next door to me at Harvard. I mean, I was really trying to be what my mother wanted. But what chance did I have? Oh, it's a delight. And I really want to honor Timothy. Timothy was a person who took me out of a fate worse than death, which was being a successful citizen. And started me on a journey that I think is the richest possible journey I could have had in a lifetime. And I think that he was the first ray of light for me. I just want to add my voice by saying that this week in Congress, in the joint session of Congress, the new president of Czechoslovakia said, "Without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better in the sphere of our being." And it was only a few months back that we saw the old Romanian president saying, "This will never happen here." And even now, I'm afraid President Bush and Mr. Sununu are trying to figure out how to contain the damage and potential chaos in which they lose their unstable king of the mountain position. But it is clear now that a historically irreversible process has started. And that's exactly what happened in the 60s. A historically irreversible process started. It didn't really start there, as Tim pointed out. It goes way back in all of human history. But something did happen in the 60s that was prepared for by doors of perception, that was prepared for by the beats in the 50s. Something happened that was of no less moment than what has just happened in Eastern Europe and Tiananmen Square and so on. And we are all now cleaning up after it, not in a negative sense, but figuring out what to do with the fact that it happened. And we can hardly understand the implications of what it means in our lives. And we are sitting here often feeling like we are the downtrodden. And it's quite the reverse. We have figured out how it happened. And now, as people on the platform have said in the earlier panel, now it's up to each individual, one of us. The way Gandhi said, my life is my message. Now the way each of us lives makes a statement that it did work, that it did happen. I can't really any longer be frightened of the dragons of government. I can't really, because I see how ephemeral and how paper tigerish they are. And I feel the fear in the culture. And I feel that what's required of us, it's interesting. I find myself in a funny position today because I'm caught between Rick's desire for us to put forward a good face, to be responsible researchers, to play a part in the game of Western science. And I'm also, on the other side, seeing that what has happened is far more profound than that.
Right.
And that what we are doing now is trying to find a way to bring more people along through trying to legitimize our game in society. But the underground process in which psychedelics have continued to be used in the society and have come into mainstream consciousness, that goes on independent of whether we lose or win on the front we're talking about in research. Because it was just in the same way as when we did the Good Friday study of Walter Pankey. We were doing a double-blind placebo study, and all of us realized the absurdity of that. That the question of whether psychedelics was anything or not, for anybody who'd taken them, was quite an irrelevant question. And yet, that study was done, and it was a brilliant product of our days at Harvard, I think. I think that Walter refused to take drugs until after he completed the study, so people wouldn't accuse him of what they accused us of sipping our own whiskey. And I want to point out that very recently, Rick here has done a follow-up of Walter Pankey's Good Friday study, and has really gone back and found those people who turned on in Marsh Chapel at Boston University. And what he found was among the experimental group, the people that had psilocybin, long-term persisting effects included enhanced appreciation of life and nature, a deepening sense of joy, a commitment to their vocation, an enhanced appreciation of unusual experiences and emotions, increased tolerance of other religious systems, deepening equanimity in the face of difficult life crises, greater compassion for other peoples, minorities, and nature, increased subsequent participation in civil rights, anti-Vietnam, etc. Timeless eternity and death is not seen as so fearful, therefore they are willing to take more risks. Now that is almost 30 years later of a group of minister students who took psilocybin in Marsh Chapel on Good Friday. And as you recall, of the experimental subjects in the double-blind placebo study, 9 of them had some criteria that would class that as a religious mystical experience. And in the control group, 1 of the 10 had 1 of the 9 criteria. In other words, it's not nothing. if you needed to make sure to understand that. Now, I was asked to talk about what are the benefits of what we did in the 60s and what are our mistakes. Tim didn't deal with what he might have done differently. So, but I can play the straight part, which I've done doing with Tim for years. Here are the things that happened, as I can see it, from what started in that period. First of all, the culture broke out of the psychotomimetic model of using chemicals. That up until then, in this society, primarily these chemicals were considered psychosis-inducing and under the control of the psychiatric establishment. These chemicals started to be seen, these herbs and plants, started to be seen as sacraments, as they are used in other societies. They were used for creative purposes, and the therapeutic possibilities started to become apparent. The chemicals in the early 60s among the 15 to 25-year-olds became a rite of passage, which was shown in the Woodstock moment. In a culture very sadly lacking in rites of passage, where there is a lot of confusion about shift from childhood to maturity. That period made us clear that it wasn't just the chemical you ingested, but it was the set and setting. And here, of course, the traditions like the American Indian, the shamanic traditions, we knew all that, but we never listened to it. After I started with psychedelics, suddenly books that I had passed on the bookshelf saying what a bunch of rot suddenly became the most treasured volumes for me. Books of American Indian law, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, things like that, the Upanishads and the Vedas. In other words, it opened our link to the East and to an incredibly rich philosophical, psychological, and spiritual heritage of humanity that we had primarily been closed to, except for Max Mueller, just a very few things. It really opened us to the East, and I've been living off it ever since. And partly the way it did that was because the chemicals in the psychedelics allowed us to override our habits of thinking. And when we looked around in Western psychology for models about that, they were absent. And when we looked in the East, in things like the Visuddhimagga, there they were, very beautifully articulated. And here were a group of people in the East that we had treated really as almost as barbarians, that had a wisdom about human consciousness that became, and they became our elders. One of them, of course, became my guru. So it opened us to meditation and spiritual practices. Of course, it became faddish in the 70s, but beyond the fads of gurus and all that, there was a deep process, and there is a deep meditative investment in this society at this moment. Whether you call it stress reduction or whatever you call it, it's there, and it's growing all the time. And that's part of the result of what happened in the 60s. It opened ways for networking because it opened our horizontal power structures rather than our vertical power structures. And that's part of the information age that Tim's talking about now. In a way, it was a precursor of that in allowing us to see vertical institutions as much more ephemeral. And that was the deeper part of the shift that happened then, which I think is the most fundamental shift, which was the shift in our perception of reality. That what happened to us was what I think Einstein did to Newton. It went from treating a reality as absolute to seeing that all realities are relative. And the minute you do that, social institutions are up for grabs. That changes the whole ballgame right there. And that is one of the things that has happened, and that isn't turnable back. And that's part of why there is so much chaos in the moment in the culture, because social institutions which kept the structures going are breaking down because people don't value them. In Boston, when I was growing up, on Sunday you went to church. Now on Sunday you go to the shopping mall. That's a difference in values. Family structures broke down. And we don't have to say values, we just have to look at change. The question is, who rides with change and who gets frightened and tries to grab at the old history? And this is a moment when changing from absolute reality to relative reality is a tremendous opportunity for growth, and it has a lot of scariness to it. But that's part of what our work is. That shift of reality started to spread into the world through minstrels like Bob Dylan and like the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead and Rolling Stones and Big Brother and on and on. And it's gotten so far now, I'll tell you how far it's gotten, that if I speak now in the Middle West, which I'll be doing in a few weeks when I'm on tour, if I speak in a relatively medium-sized city, I can look at an audience in which 70 to 80% of the audience has never taken psychedelics, they have never read Eastern literature, they've never been to the East. And I can say exactly the same things I said in 1965 or 70, which then were heard by an audience of a few people between 15 and 25, and that audience is going, yes. The audience in the Midwest is saying, yeah, we hear you. Now, how do they hear us? What happened? How did those values get inculcated into the culture? I think because you can't see it, you don't think it exists. But then when you get these little clues around the edge, you begin to see the profundity of what the social changes that were wrought at that point in the 60s. The Grateful Dead now is a major religious ritual. Our work with the dying. The work started really by Eric Cass and people like that way back, beautiful men. That has done incredibly in terms of awakening us, bringing death out of the closet. And a lot of the way in which now so many people want to work with the dying comes out of that kind of psychedelic process that happened in the 60s. Okay, I think I should say something about the mistakes. Of the early 60s of our research. In one way, I kind of am with Timothy, what mistakes? It was life, we did the best we could. So I don't say these in some sense of, I don't know what sense I say them in, I'll just say them. When we did that research at Harvard, very shortly after the beginning, we realized that this was a heresy to that social institution. That Harvard is an institution committed to the intellect and to rational analytic process. And when we brought on something that dealt with intuitive, transcendent, unitive experiences, in which the intellect became a subsystem rather than the metasystem, we were taking on the priest class of the church, and we were doing it within the confines of that church. And what we were doing is going on to a football, and to a tennis court with football cleats. That's the way I would understand it. And I think that once we got going, because we were ingesting our own product, we lost our connection with the community around us. And I feel that this was neither our fault nor their fault. It was one of the results of the profundity of this experience that we couldn't turn away and couldn't turn back. But we did lose our support system, and we didn't slow down enough to keep it with us. Because it finally got to the point of who's taken it and who hasn't. And that bridge became unbridgeable after a while. And it was shocking to us that people we loved and worked with as colleagues no longer were our colleagues. I think we got a little confused about evolution and revolution. And I think we played with the revolutionary aspect of psychedelics, when to me the far more interesting issue are the evolutionary aspects. And I think that had we been more evolved in our wisdom, and not feeling we were inventing the wheel all over again, we would have had an appreciation of what the fears were of the society and how to work with those fears, rather than just pitting ourselves against them. I don't think the way we did it was the only way it could have been done. I think we were over-enthusiastic about how easy behavior change would be. When I look at many of my friends that I took acid with in the 60s, I see that there's been a lot of work they've done, but there's a lot yet to do. And I remember Tim and I had a chart on the wall of how soon everybody would get enlightened. It involved putting acid in the water supply, but it should be very soon. We talked,
which is attempting to gather the repository of scientific data that's been generated by the psychedelic research beginning in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and not so much recently. But we often think about the knowledge of the rainforest or the wisdom of the medicine man from other cultures as something that's at risk for disappearing. But what the Albert Hoffman Foundation has realized is that from our own culture, from our own background, we're at risk of losing a lot of this data. And so that's what he's been working on with the Albert Hoffman Foundation. Ralph Metzner was one of the pioneers of psychedelic research, also at Harvard, where he was a graduate student when a lot of the research happened. He's been quite active at the California Institute for Integral Studies and written some of the best material that I've read on MDMA, and has also done quite a lot of work on native cultures and ecological issues. And Terence McKenna is very actively involved in Botanical Dimensions, which is an organization he founded to bring the lore as well as the plant material itself from various endangered areas and for tribes that are under threat of extinction and dislocation, to try to propagate those plants and to retain those stories for a future age when we may be more able to do this research. So the panel has quite a variety of perspectives and quite a variety of goals and past experience for our particular area of interest tonight, psychedelics in the 1990s. So what we're going to start out is to learn from each other and to learn from the audience. And Tim will now start us with his version of the year 2000, how to get there.
Well, the first thing that is on my mind is to express, I think, almost everyone in this room feels what an extraordinary day this has been.
Where are the mics? Stand up. Stand up.
Yes, that long talk with Annalise about the fact that there are no women on this panel. We're doing right here. The young lady is... Okay. Then I didn't have to talk with her about why there are no women on the panel. Well, why aren't there any women on the panel? That's not true. We had one of the most wonderful women that I've known in 70,000 years on this planet. And I hereby propose the annual Oscar of psychedelia to the best actress and the best actor, and I nominate Laura. And the matinee idol is getting better looking every year. Yeah. It's like, what a performance. I predict that the next 10 years are going to be the most explosive 10 years of world history. Who, a year ago, could have predicted what would happen in Eastern Europe? Well, President Kemp. We knew, didn't we? All the pundits and the CIA experts and the Rand Corporation, well, it took us by surprise. I mean, it came so suddenly. Well, fuck that. If you were at Woodstock in '69, if you were in Prague in '68, if you were in Paris in '68, I mean, it took a long time coming. That's one of the things I'd like to say. And the nice thing about it is we're all going to say different things, different perceptions, different visions, because that's the name of the game. Each of us is equipped with 100 billion cell brain. And each brain cell has the knowledge processing capacity of a powerful computer. So between your left ear and your right ear, you've got more computing power than we never dream of. They tell us that there are more connections going on in your brain than there are atoms in the universe. I mean, we're getting, I don't sound like Carl Sagan here. What's going to happen is a continual empowerment of the individual. An empowerment of the individual. And that's why some of you are going to be concerned with committees and organizations and licenses and bureaucrats and that's good. I mean, go for it. I remember, as you all remember, those days when we watched the 100, 200, 500, 900,000 young people in Tiananmen Square. And I was watching it with a fairly famous left-wing liberal progressive intellectual. He said to me, Timothy, these kids, they're politically naive. They're not organized. They don't know what they want. They all want Cadillacs. Like they all want the yuppies. And I said, well, you're right there a little bit. I'd say 5% want Cadillacs. 5% want Volkswagen buses, 5% want Porsches, 5% want motorcycles, 5% want 10-speed bicycles so they can drive to see their boyfriend or girlfriend. In other words, it's pro-choice. And that's what puzzles the politicians and all the theorists. They can't, what's the policy here? Where's the licensing effect? It's pro-choice. The incredible thing the astonishing thing about freedom, and I think I can say this for all of us with modesty, prove me wrong. Can you tell me a group of 1,000 people in world history that brought about more changes in the direction of freedom than those of us represented in this room, plus the Lenins and the Libby's and so forth? I mean, what we did for human individual freedom. But the paradoxical thing about freedom is, and I sympathize with poor Gorbachev. How about a round of applause for Gorbachev? Huh? And Rachel, like she's the one behind the throne. How about Rachel? I don't know if you know the story, but it's about the future. I did a conference in Moscow about 3 years ago, before it all happened, and there were all scientists and artists and all that, and then Yoko Ono went, and she was the one that got invited for a private audience with Gorby and Raisa. Now, this has got to be true because I read it in Rolling Stone, okay? So, and I heard it also from Yoko. She was there, and Gorby said to her, "Isn't it a shame that John isn't here to sing Give Peace a Chance?" Now, at the time, in the White House, with Nancy and Ronnie, number one, they never heard of the song. Number two, if they had, they hated it. The point I'm making is that what we did here in a very disorganized way was heard around the world. I could go on telling you stories to prove the fact that they listened to they watched what we were doing here. Now, one of the big lessons that I've learned over the last few years, and particularly in the last few months, is the most tricky, complicated, difficult thing to deal with is personal freedom. We're so accustomed to being told what to do and lining up to get licenses and all that, that like in Bulgaria, they said you're free. What does that mean? I mean, it's 400 years under the Turks, it's 40 years under like that. I mean, the real interesting, tough work starts when you're free. The easiest thing to do is just drop out, and not drop out, drop in and follow like that. And the interesting thing about it is that Gorby learned to his dismay. When you free people, they fucking go in all different directions. You're not going to necessarily like a lot of them. When you free them, a lot of them just want to come east, and a lot of them want Cadillac. Some of them, like the Armenians, just want to kill the Azerbaijans. They've been waiting for 500 years to kick their neighbor's ass. I believe in technology, and I believe that what we did would have been absolutely worthless. It hadn't been for the electronic technology and rock and roll records and MTV and even the fax machines and the VCRs. In some of those dictatorships in Southeast Asia, they banned the television, they banned radio, they banned movies, but every village had a VCR. And what were they watching? They were watching, I don't know, pornography from Hong Kong. Who cares? As Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message, the medium determines reality. And I see psychedelic drugs as technologies. They're simply different ways to boot up, activate the brain. So I'm going to finish now, but what's going to happen in the next 10 years is a new form of technology. It's going to empower the individual 14-year-old child to suit up, put on a cyberspace suit or a virtual reality suit in which you can literally move around the world, meet people. You can have 5 love affairs in different cities. You can be doing your business. Then you take off your suit. And here you are in the physical flesh. In other words, all the work in the future will be done by robots or by virtual reality like that. When you take off your cyber suit, you can use the body for what it's supposed to be used for, as an instrument of sacred communication and aesthetic expression and graceful athletics. In other words, to use the body, even transport your body to do work, is your robot. We mean this, you're a surf or you're a robot. In the future, we'll use our bodies only for sacramental exchanges or to use your body to do work in the future when you can suit up and move around like that would be like using your tongue to clean the floor or your penis to knock a nail in. Do not think that when we talk about electronic realities that we're depreciating the body. We are freeing the body for what it's supposed to be used for. So what I'm saying is, watch for this technology. Now, you may think I'm joking or that I'm smoking funny drugs. But last Christmas, 700,000 Nintendo Power Gloves were sold. And kids put them on, and for the first time in human history, human beings, individuals, could put your hand through the screen of the tube that we've all been watching 7 hours a day with our nose pressed against it, watching Dan Rather's realities, or Roger Ailes and Lee Atwater and the Republican Party, great fabricators, their reality. Last Christmas, 700,000 kids could put their hand through and fight. That's all right. McLuhan said it. The medium is the message, and if the kids can do that and play ninja games through the screen, we're going to learn how to do it any way you want. I must tell you one thing and then I'll stop.
What about
we are now in the position that the hunter-gatherers were in before there was any kind of artificial tools or habitation. And we're sitting here and say, hey, I just ate this vegetable. And I could see ahead, you know, the fact we can chip a stone here, that means that pretty soon we can cut down trees, and we're going to be living in houses with wood. We're going to be in rooms where you can't see a tree or you can't see a bush. Oh, no. Yeah, we're in that same position now. The future is going to be creating electronic realities. You know, think about in which we will spend 5 or 6 hours of our time during the day. Now that frightens you. Remember this horrible, horrible fact, which Tom mentions, by the way, in his new book, Vineland. How many of you read Vineland? Right. Wow. Yeah. The average American watches television 7 hours a day. That means the average American in the most enlightened and rich country in world history lies like a slug-oid amoeboid with their optical suckers sucking junk food passively. So instead of doing passively, we're going to empower with our technology. And I wish Jaron Lanier were here. I wish Eric Gullickson were here. I wish Ted Nelson were here. Who else? Autodesk, Eric Lyon. I wish they were here. Brenda Laurel. There's a group of people working on this. And
what about
don't worry.
Robert Heinlein? Don't you wish he were alive and here?
Robert Heinlein, he says.
Robert Heinlein. He was an Air Force admiral. William Gibson. How about William Gibson? How can we have a meeting without William Gibson? And anyway, a lot's going to happen. Main thing, stay sane and look for the new technology. And I love you.
My vision of that is that it's going to change as people begin to think more in ecological terms. We begin to think more in recognition and acknowledgement of our interdependence with all forms of life, and we begin to see that we're related in multiple complex ways with the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and with these various kinds of ecosystems in which we live. Then there will be communities of people. There will be, I'm very impressed by this, the bioregional concept. There will be, instead of these monolithic nation states, there will be small, bioregionally localized, partially, largely self-sufficient communities where people will try to live with sensitivity to the land in a sustainable way, self-sufficient, sustainable, and celebrate the diversity that exists within each community as well as among different communities. People will take responsibility for their own health. Instead of relying on a medical system with drugs and so forth for their health, they will take responsibility for their own health. They will adjust their diet, their nutrition. They will pay attention to foods that strengthen the body, food that strengthens the heart, the emotions, the feelings, foods that heighten cognitive processes or expand consciousness, and foods or vegetables, intelligent vegetables that facilitate religious experience when ingested or absorbed in a sacramental context, such as we've known for years and years and years. I'll end by giving you a vision that I heard about 3 or 4 years ago by a very wise woman, a seeress, who was asked to give a vision of what she saw as the future of psychedelic drugs in our society. And she said that what she saw was that these kinds of plants, Joe's referred to plants, have been used since the most ancient times all over the world by people to be able to communicate with spirit, to be closer to spirit and live in a closeness to spirit and nature. And as that has not happened, as they've come away from that and tried to use these plants for other things or in a reckless way, then the plants, the intelligence of the plant itself has withdrawn. That means they become inaccessible. That means, for example, they've become forgotten, like the mushrooms. The sacred mushroom was completely forgotten for 400 years until Watson and Maria Sabina rediscovered it. The mysteries of Eleusis were completely forgotten. What was the really inherent, the sacred potion that was involved in it was forgotten until Hoffman rediscovered it. And another way that these things become inaccessible is by being made illegal. So if there are people, and I don't know that there'll be ever a large majority of people who will want to use these kinds of plants to expand their consciousness, but those that do will find their way to them and take responsibility for their own health and their own way of life and their own consciousness, and try to live lives that are sane and decent and acknowledge and respect the integrity of all other life forms on this earth.
I wish I had some of that stuff. Well, I was surprised to hear McLuhan invoked so many times today, and I will do it again. McLuhan had an idea of what he called the global village, and the global village is coming to be. This is what the crisis that is being presented to us as a crisis in communism is. It isn't a crisis for communism. Communism is going first. But what it is the death knell for centralized structure, for centralized. If you think what we've been through in the past year is something, wait till you see what's on the agenda. And I don't mean great CNN feed from Moscow as the Soviet Union turns into 15 independent republics. I mean what's going to happen here. Because what is so terrifying about Gorbachev from the point of view of the powers that be is that he models a leader who can say, we did it wrong. Baker was on one of the talk shows after one of these we did it wrong statements by Gorbachev. And they said to him, well, under what circumstances would an official of the United States government admit a mistake? And he said, well, you don't understand. You see, we have a collective decision-making apparatus, and hence, we don't make mistakes. You see? So I think that, to return to McLuhan for a moment, what's happening is, as Yeats said in his poem, the center does not hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, but as fans of chaos, we should know that this mere anarchy is the incarnation of our goddess Discordia, who is going to pull down the hunky structure that is oppressing everybody. What I see happening, and it was touched upon by others here, is this intensification of local identification, bioregionalism, awareness of your immediate place, and then no hierarchical structure or identification until you reach the planetary level. I live in Sonoma County, and I am a citizen of Earth. I recognize no intermediate structures except when I have to. So I agree with Tim. I cheer on the people who present the protocols and plead their cases before these gray-faced medical boards. But in my opinion, you just circumvent all that. You go around it. It's irrelevant. History has these dominator types by the balls. And you know, history is a psychedelic experience. It's the collective unfolding of the dream of our species in space and time. And we are at the apex. This is the peak. This is the second hour of the trip. We're going over the top.
Too late for questions, but the audience and the speakers will be here for the next hour and a half or so, and I'd like to again just thank.
So the sun comes up.
I'd like to express my appreciation to Elise for helping me coordinate all this. And also for Faustin for doing the sound and William for trying to make this into a television documentary. And so now just enjoy yourselves and let's meet all the marvelous people that are here. Thank you so much.
Now this is the part where he writes the Shakespeare essays, Shakespeare in Religion, and he speaks about the Tempest, the last of Shakespeare, and about Prospero. About Prospero, who said, and I read to him the quotation, "Our rebels now are ended. These are our actors, as I foretold you, who are all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all of which it inherits, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such a stuff and dream are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sea."
Prospero is here enunciating the doctrine of Maya. The world is an illusion, but an illusion which we must take seriously, because it is real as far as it goes. In those aspects of the reality which we are capable of comprehending, our business is to wake up.
Our business is to wake up. I really needed that in that moment, because here I was near my dying husband, and he was speaking all the time about death. And I was wondering, does he want to tell me something? What should I understand? And then suddenly when he said our business is to wake up, I woke up, and I understood that he was doing his work. And I just had to stay out and just do my job.
Our business is to wake up. We have to find ways in which to detect the whole of reality in the one illusory part which our self-centered consciousness permits us to see. We must not live thoughtlessly, taking our illusion for the complete reality. But at the same time, we must not live too thoughtfully, in the sense of trying to escape from the dream state. We must be continually on our watch for ways in which we may enlarge our consciousness.
I wonder if all knew then, the confusion that this would come from this drugs enlarging of the consciousness. I think that it wasn't at that moment.
We must not attempt to live outside the world which is given us, but we must somehow learn how to transform it and transfigure it. Too much wisdom is as bad as too little wisdom, and there must be no magic tricks. We must learn to come to reality without the enchanter's wand and his book of the words. One must find a way of being in this world while not being of it. A way of living in time without being completely swallowed up by time. Hotspur, as he is dying, sums up the human predicament with a few memorable words. But thought's the slave of life, and life time's fool, and time that takes survey of all the world must have a stop. One more.
Yeah, one more, which is different. This was something that happened about 1 year before he died. He took some psilocybin, a very small, a very small dosage of psilocybin, 4 mg. We were in my studio, our house, our home is gone, and I had a studio to work in. And usually we put sound, of course, flowers, everything is very quiet. There is the sound in the bath, there was the musical offering, I think. And after he took this, usually there was a period of quietness, just tranquility, listening, seeing what's going to go out, to happen. Well, this time something completely different happened. To begin with, Olga said, please turn off the music, the record store. And then he began to pace up and down in a very worried way. And I was trying to hear what he was saying, and he said the word limbo, and he said the word confusion. And it was very, very strange and different. Went on for about 20 minutes. And then suddenly he sat down near the tape recorder, and he said, everything is fine now. And the first word, the tape recorder was on, the first word on tape was...
You see, this is... I was thinking of one of your titles. This is one of the ways of trying to make ice cubes out of running water, isn't it? To fix something and try to keep it. Of course, it's always wrong.
I thought he was speaking about the recorder, so I said, well, let's stop the recording.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, the pure light is the greatest ice cube of all. The ultimate ice cube.
I was then writing my recipes for living and loving, and one of them was called Don't Try to Make Ice Cube Out of a Flow in the River. Is the idea of not trying to stop life, which is flowing and changing all the time. And that recipe gave me some trouble writing, and so it was a current phrase with us.
The pure light, this is the greatest ice cube of all. It's the ultimate ice cube.
You thought you were going to have that today?
Well, now I can if I want to, but I mean, it's very good to realize that it is just so to say, the mirror image of this other thing. It's just this total distraction. I mean, if you can immobilize the total distraction long enough, then it becomes a pure one-pointed distraction, pure light.
But if you can't immobilize it, well, what do you mean?
You can immobilize it, but it isn't the real thing. You can remain for eternity in this thing at the exclusion of love and work.
Well, but I thought that thing was love and work.
Exactly. I mean, this is why it is wrong, as I was saying. This illustrates that you mustn't make ice cubes out of a flowing river. You may succeed in making ice cubes. This is the greatest ice cube in the world, but you can probably go on for, you can't go on forever, but for enormous eons, for what appears to be eternity being in the light. It completely denies the facts. It's morally wrong, and finally, of course, absolutely catastrophic.
Absolutely catastrophic. Those words are said with such a profound conviction, very powerfully said.
Absolutely catastrophic. I don't know how you got all these things, darling. What comes into this hard skull of yours? How do all these ideas, extraordinary ideas come in?
Well, at least this one of the ice cube I remember very well. I was giving LSD to this friend, and I had this feeling, I just practically was seeing a torrent of water, you know, a river, and he was trying to make such a logic out of it, so that he would show that all those people lied.
Of course they lie.
And I had the impression that he was rationalizing water, and even trying to freeze a piece of this flowing river and make ice cube out of it.
But you have so many ideas. Obviously, this terribly hard skull has a hole in it somewhere. It's certainly very remarkable.
I don't remember if I told you that phrase that is running in my mind these days. I am 1,000 people.
No, you didn't tell me.
But that also doesn't make anything very easy, you know, to be 1,000 people.
No, obviously. And when there is no anchorage anywhere, when to come back to after death, I mean, there will be no anchorage.
Oh, I see. I see.
So when there will be 1,000 people rushing in different directions, I mean, anyhow, your hair smells the same as acacias. Your head is very solid. Because the point is, when there isn't anything like this...
Oh, you mean a tangible body, yes? When there is something to hold on.
There are 1,000 different people going in 1,000 different directions, and this is what you have a hint of now, and this, of course, is what is so terrible. But I think that I know that there will always be, and I mean this is the extraordinary experience, at least there is somebody there who knows there are 1,000 other people going in different directions. That there is a fundamental sanity of the world, which is always there in spite of the 1,000 people going in 1,000 different directions. And while we are in space and time, surrounded by gravity, we are controlled to a considerable extent. But to have an insight into what it is when there isn't any control except this fundamental knowledge, I mean, this is where the Bardos are right.
Yes, I was referring to the Tibetan Buddhist Zen that he had used to get his wife when she died.
The Bardo is right. You see, you have to be aware of this thing and hang on to it for dear life. Otherwise, you're just completely in a whirlwind.
Yes, but how many people know these stuff?
Exactly. That is why they say we really ought to start preparing for this. And I must say, I think it's terribly important that through this knowledge that we get through these mushrooms, or whatever it is, you understand a little bit about what it's all about. I think the most extraordinary experience is to know that there is all this insanity, which is just the multiplication, the caricature of normal insanity that goes on. But that there is a fundamental sanity, which one can remain with and be aware of. This, of course, is the whole doctrine of the Bardo, helping people to be aware of the fundamental sanity which is there in spite of all the terrifying things, and also not really terrifying, but sometimes ecstatic, wonderful things. You mustn't go to heaven, as they continually say.
You mustn't go to heaven?
Okay, good. You mustn't go to heaven. It's just as dangerous. It's temporary. And somehow you want to hold on to the ultimate truth.
The ultimate truth of things?
Well, I mean the total light of the world. I suppose which is in the here and now we experience. It's of course the mind-body, but when you're released from the body, there has to be some experiential equivalent of the body. Something has to be held on to. I don't know.
What does one hold on then?
All you can say is fundamental sanity,
which I say is guaranteed as long as one is in the body by the fact of space and time and gravity and 3 dimensions and all the rest of it, somehow when you get rid of those anchors, but there is an equivalent of some kind which has to be caught hold of. Otherwise, the world about you is thin and becomes, what is the word, pretas, the world of restless ghosts. One goes to hell, and then in desperation, one has to rush back and get another body.
To hold on again.
To hold on again. Well, this is obviously the best thing if one hasn't got the ultimate best. It's very important, if one can, while it is happening, if one can see the outer appearance of it. It's important to look after one's affairs in a sensible way and see their importance in a silly way. But if one can, through all this, see this other level of importance, in the light of which a lot of activities will have to be cut down, there will seem to be absolutely no point in undertaking it. Although a great many have to be undertaken. But they'll be undertaken in a new kind of way, with a kind of detachment, yet with doing things to one's limit. This is again one of the paradoxes. To work to the limit to succeed in what you are doing and at the same time be detached from it. If you don't succeed, well, that's too bad. If you do succeed, you don't have to gloat over it. This is the whole story of the Bhagavad Gita. Somehow to do everything with passion and detachment.
Passion and detachment. 900 years ago, with what passion I had longed for detachment. As a musician, I wanted to be able to play with all the passion that naturally music wakes, and yet I have that detachment that brings about a respect for the composer's ideas. And here, speaking of course about the Arjuna, the great warrior, and the speech of Krishna, that tells him to go and fight, and yet they detached from the fight.
One can see what it is. He's not involved, even though he's involved up to the limit. What part of him is not involved? It's no good trying to make an analysis because as usual, it's a paradox and a mystery.
Yes, but even if
one begins to understand that that's the main problem. My nose is running. A very good reminder that the greatest philosophy is connected inextricably with running noses. One of the things they should have talked about in the gospel, obviously he was on a mountain, the Sermon on the Mount. It must have been very breezy and cold up there. Probably his nose did run.